tu. Lepas tu you nampak tak macam you boleh copy and paste like some information?
Copy streaming link ke?
Yes, copy streaming link. Ada macam dua benda that you need to copy and paste to YouTube. Baru dia live stream ke YouTube. Sekejap, let me just pull up my YouTube and see apa yang dia nak.
By the way, Zee, you host kan? Boleh tak you buat PRS host juga sebab dia nak share screen time.
Okay.
Alright, thank you.
Or alternative, sekejap. Got it.
We're on YouTube though. Arman? Okay.
Yep. Yes. Sekejap, let me just see how to live stream this on YouTube.
We're on YouTube though. Arman? Okay, I can hear myself. That it's delayed.
Wait, is it already live streaming on YouTube?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll show you the link.
Izzy, can you make Rashwin co-host?
Yes.
And Fadilin juga.
Okay.
Assalamualaikum.
Salam.
Nampak? Okey? Ikut. Assalamualaikum Arman, apa khabar?
Waalaikumsalam Kak Haji, sihat Alhamdulillah. Haji apa khabar?
Alhamdulillah.
Just to introduce everyone, ni Tuan Haji Khairil, the Vice President of MRA Siswa, and he'll be giving a very short welcoming speech. So Azida will go first, and then Tuan Haji, and then we'll proceed to Tunku Zain.
Siapa dia bagi keynote address today?
Tunku Zain, the founding president of Ideas.
Okay.
Hi everyone, boleh dengar suara?
Hi Dr. Bella, yes boleh.
Okay. Thanks. I just wanted to test my voice.
For sure Doctor.
Okay, I'm around.
Alright Doctor, thank you, welcome.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. So greetings and welcome to the Siswa Empowerment Summit of 2022. It's so nice to see all of you joining us here today on a Saturday morning, and I hope everyone is excited because we are definitely very, very excited to be bringing this event to you guys. So just a quick question, how is everyone's energy level this morning? Let me know in the chat if it's high, low, or maybe you're feeling somewhere in the middle. All right, I see a lot of highs and a lot of people excited. Okay. Awesome, guys. Right, so hope you guys would continue on with this energy level throughout the 2 days of Siswa Empowerment Summit. So first and foremost, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Adriel, and I am currently a finance and economics student from Taylor's University. And today I will be serving as MC for the opening ceremony. All right, so here are some of the house rules. Feel free to turn on your camera if you're comfortable too. Don't be shy, because it would be great if you could see more faces rather than just your names. So do turn off your mic also when you're not speaking to prevent any distractions in the room. And lastly, feel free to ask any questions either in the chat box or by raising your hand using the Zoom function. All right, so here is our agenda today for day one. The upcoming sessions would be an opening remarks segment, followed by a welcoming address. And next up, we'll be having a opening keynote session, followed by a very special performance segment. And right after that, from 9:45 to 10:45, we'll be having a very interesting panel session. And subsequently, we'll be having a Q&A session. Then we'll be having a 15-minute break after that. So when everyone comes back from their 15-minute break, we'll be going into a separate Zoom link for each workshop sessions, which I believe everyone has chosen beforehand. So after the workshops, we'll be having a closing session, and that would mark the end of day one of Siswa Empowerment Summit. Now, allow me to give you guys a brief introduction about our organization, MRA Siswa, and to let you in on what our summit is all about. So MRA Siswa is a student-led wing of the Malaysian Relief Agency, MRA for short, a humanitarian organization registered under the Trustee Act 1952. So we focus on the focal areas of, firstly, local engagement, global engagement, education, environment, culture, and Siswa empowerment. And our mission is to firstly organize humanitarian missions to encourage volunteerism and acts of giving among students. Next, we also aim to promote the values of altruism and ambition for change among students. MRA Siswa was founded in March 2020 to encourage the involvement of students during the COVID-19 pandemic. On the left are some pictures of our projects and initiatives to give back to the community. Our organization brings out the mission to increase students' participation to address the aspects of the 6 focal areas which I've mentioned earlier. And here we are bringing you the Siswa Empowerment Summit, which aim to inspire Malaysian students to find their voice and passion in volunteerism to bring forth meaningful change in different areas. There'll be lots of exciting sessions coming your way these 2 days, so please do stay tuned and stick around for those segments. And now, that would wrap up the introduction about MRA Siswa and a sneak peek to our program today. And next up, we will be having Ms. Azida Ahmad Azmi, President of MRA Siswa and Deputy Organizing Chairperson of the Siswa Empowerment Summit 2022, to give her opening speech. As a cultural studies major, she has recently completed her thesis on the cultural barriers to women's empowerment in education. She is passionate in this field of study and aspires to strengthen her understanding in areas involving capacity building, migration, and culture in order to contribute significantly to society. Let's welcome Ms. Azida.
All right. Thank you so much, Adriel, for being such an amazing moderator. Greetings, everyone. Firstly, I'd like to officially welcome all attendees of the Siswa Empowerment Summit 2022. From our notable panelists for today, inspiring speakers from such reputable organizations, as well as our impressive line of delegates and participants, I'd like to express my heartfelt gratitude to all of you for making time out of your busy schedule to make it to our summit today. And in the spirit of Ma'al Hijrah, let us walk away from this summit with a lot of wisdom to make meaningful contributions to society. Not to forget, I would also like to express my gratitude to all my diligent, reliable team members who worked relentlessly despite it being a hectic week with some of you juggling internships, final exams, and so on and so forth, but you still managed to make this event a success. And without you, the Siswa Empowerment Summit, from planning all the way to execution, would only be an illusion stuck in my head. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for your generosity and sincerity. It means the world to the people that we serve, right? I'll start my speech today with this quote that resonates deeply with me. It says, "What you do makes a difference, so you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make." And in the simplest terms, the quote is simply asking you, what kind of changes do you want to see in the world? And for the Siswa Empowerment Summit specifically, the difference we want to make is simply to be able to provide a platform for delegates and participants to walk away with knowledge that can strengthen your competencies as well as building networks across regions, right? And if you observe the act of volunteerism in not only our country, but also in many other countries, volunteerism has become a prevalent thing in developed economies. And it is seen that there is a increasing rise in youth volunteerism itself. However, as is the case for other sectors, the global pandemic left significant impacts on the third sector, perhaps even worse in the last decade, right? Just recently, yesterday I read news saying third sector organizations reported their struggles dealing with inflation, as well as reductions in a large proportion of their fundraising income, with fundraising events being the bread and butter for many third sector organizations. This could potentially be a dead end. The demand for services is even greater in a time of need, and at the same time, funding is increasingly constrained. And due to this, there should be an urgency for us to reflect and improve our practices in order to serve our communities and societies better. The third sector is, in many ways, it is the last line of defense in protecting communities. We work in the margins, trying to help to mitigate social risks that individuals, families, and other communities are facing. Therefore, this summit, in my opinion, is a very much needed one to help organizations to stay competitive and come up with practical and long-lasting solutions to the challenges that we are now facing. If we don't start realizing how bad external factors are affecting the sphere of volunteerism, there will be a perfect storm that will exacerbate the existing core challenges facing organizations in the third sector, leaving us in a position where the only thing that we can do by then is to only be reactive and less able to plan for the long term. And these challenges are significant because third sector resilience is at the heart of community resilience, right? So despite being in MRA Siswa for 2 years, I have yet to actually find answers to many important questions, such as how disaster relief efforts can be maintained without relying on donations from the public and support from businesses or corporates. How can we inspire unpaid volunteers in student organizations to be motivated? And how can we encourage people to take full responsibility of their work? And how can we protect the sector's ability to play an independent role? And lastly, how can we empower youth, especially students like ourselves, you and me, to take part in humanitarian or volunteering work, despite facing a number of barriers that reduce our time to volunteer, right? And to answer these questions, the team at MRA Siswa that I'm very, very proud of, they gathered a variety of individuals from various backgrounds and profiles, which I hope will be able to help you be inspired by each other. All right, so I've talked so much. My last closing line would be, being at MRA Siswa has really changed my life in terms of where I see myself in the next 5 years, what kind of career path that I wish to pursue, what kind of program or policy that we can develop for underserved communities, and many more. I feel like MRA Siswa is really my stepping stone that I'm so grateful for, because I was able to understand how the contribution of the third sector is important, not only in terms of the results that are achieved, but also the optimism that people may feel about the defense of human rights in the world. I am honored to have met so many incredible people in MRA Siswa. And once again, thank you so much, everyone, for working with me, for trusting me enough to lead you. And I pass this back to our talented moderator. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much, Ms. Azida. I really agree on what you've mentioned about the third sector and the importance of volunteerism, especially in trying times. And as students in organizations, in student organizations, we should really strive to be active in humanitarian work despite the many challenges that we may face. And thank you so much for your inspiring speech, and just wanted to take this opportunity to really thank you for your leadership and guidance during your tenure in MRA Siswa in bringing us to greater heights. All right, so next up, we'll be having a special guest from the Malaysian Relief Agency to deliver his speech. Tuan Haji Khairil Anwar Khalid is currently the Vice President of the Malaysian Relief Agency. He first started off on a career in humanitarian work in 1989, together with the International Humanitarian Aid Body based in the United States. In 2009, he was one of the individuals who pioneered the establishment of the Malaysian Relief Agency. His expertise is in the field of humanitarian logistics and has gone on mission trips to various countries, including Thailand, Sri Lanka, Iraq, Indonesia, and many more. We are really excited to hear from him. And now, let us welcome Tuan Haji Khairil for his opening speech. Sorry, Tuan Haji, I think you are muted.
Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum and very good morning to everyone attending the Siswa Empowerment Summit this morning. Thank you, Adriel, the moderator, and also Azida for giving very inspiring speech just now. Thank you very much. And for the warm greeting. First and foremost, I would like to convey, and also on behalf of my President, Dr. Muhammad Sulaiman, MRA President, and all our ESCO members, the heartfelt gratitude to MRA Siswa for inviting me as to MRA Siswa Empowerment Summit 2022. As you know, as a Deputy President of Malaysian Relief Agency, I have been with MRA since the formation of MRA and have participated in numerous international missions. But it's not always that I attend such refreshing initiative hosted by our youth, MRA Siswa. Thank you very much. This is a very good platform for us to discuss and how we want to go forward in the humanitarian field, inshallah. Malaysia Relief Agency is a humanitarian organization registered under the Trustee Act, as what Andrea told us just now, with the aim of assisting those in need locally and internationally due to natural disaster and or conflicts. What we mean by conflict here is man-made conflicts, such as low-intensity warfare, or in fact, the outbreak, large-scale warfare. This is where we're working all around the world and also in Malaysia. As a non-profit organization, all activities are sponsored and supported by concerned individuals, corporations, and also local and international agencies. We'll be working with various international agencies and also with the Malaysian government and also with other foreign government and assisting aids to the needy. In fact, we were working with UNHCR, United Nations High Commission for Refugees, to assist the refugees in Malaysia, and also working with ICRC in assisting the stateless children, especially stateless people in Sabah and Sarawak. Okay, MRA received a special consultative status from United Nations, ECOSOC, in 2014. This we were recognized by United Nations on our contribution to the, to assist the needy and also the vulnerable people. We have extended our chapters to every state in Malaysia, actually, and our state chapter play a vital role in delivering humanitarian assistance to needy all over Malaysia, especially during the MCO. We have been working almost in all districts in Malaysia, from Perlis up to Sabah and Sarawak. We have been working in coordination with the various local agencies, especially with the government agencies like TUDM, the militaries, and we also working with MKN, and also working with NATMA. However, I am impressed with the commitment shown by the MRA Siswa to balance by being involved in the physical work as well as visual initiative to empower others in the areas of volunteerism. Thank you very much, MRA Siswa. Volunteering is a way of giving back to your community while developing important social skills. You have to develop your social skill to give back to your community. It's also a selfless act and a sacrifice, but when you start doing it, you usually discover the benefit outweigh all things that you have given up yourself. No? As a humanitarian can be defined as a person who cares about people and who often participate in charities or does good work to show that they care. Therefore, many acts fall into this category. Caring about people and doing good work does not have to be done through an official organization, but to have a good coordination, you need to work with certain organizations to deliver the aid effectively, like MRA and other humanitarian organizations. People all over the world engage in volunteerism for a great variety of reasons. There are a lot of reasons people in the world volunteers. Some of them to help eliminate poverty and to improve basic health and education. Some are to tackle the environmental issues, to reduce the risk of disasters or to combat social exclusion and violent conflict, especially in the war zone. In all these fields, volunteerism makes a specific contribution by generating well-being for the people and also to the communities that we serve. Having seen that, I want to express my profound gratitude for the opportunity to be part of your flagship event and sincere congratulations to MRA Siswa for the job well done with its launch. It's a commendable endeavor that you are taking to provide your peers the tools they need to reassess and improve their practices in their reserve organization and individuals. Volunteering is a difficult field. To be frank with you, to be a volunteer is a difficult field, actually. And it can be quite difficult to recruit people to serve in the humanitarian sectors. However, MRA Siswa has consistently worked to promote volunteerism among the peers, young people, and societies over the past few months. I'm really impressed by how they were able to initiate an event that will enable participants to leave with valuable information that they can apply to their own particular organization. I've been working in the humanitarian organization for the past 30 years, actually. No? So when I start, I'm still young like you guys, no? I'm still young during that time, 20 plus, no? But I've been working with a lot of senior humanitarian workers that really give me the trait of how to work in the humanitarian field. So mentoring is very important in humanitarian field, especially when you go on the ground. I've been working in disaster zone, I've been working in the war zone, and actually this impact not just for the people that we assist, but also for myself, I've been working with, for example, I've been working in Bosnia for the 6 years in Bosnia. I was staying in Bosnia for 6 years in Sarajevo. So we have an office there in Sarajevo. We call it Malaysia Relief International during that time. And we've been working with various international agencies and also with various Bosnian government actually during the war, after also after the war. During the war, we work with various local NGOs. I want to specifically mention about one NGO. We call it Sumaya. These are women NGOs. A lot of people ask me, why are you working with women NGOs? No, because for me, women NGOs, women actually play a very vital role, an important role in resisting aid, especially during the conflict and also in the war zone. Okay, this Sumaya groups is one of the NGOs in Bosnia. We are preparing around 3,500 meals and 5,000 meals every day without fail during the war. For 4 years during the war, we are distributing the food. We cook the food, but as you know, there is no electricity, there is no gas, there is no water. It's very hard and very tough for the volunteers, our volunteers, in fact, to prepare the food. But with all the sincerity and all the strength that they have to assist the people during the war, we managed to do it. And we also managed with our medical help to deliver around 3,000 1,500 babies during the war. So our doctors and nurses delivered, giving a prenatal care and postnatal care. It's not easy in the war zone with all the snipers, and all those things. It's not easy, actually. And we also been working with rape victims. We didn't call them rape victims, but we call them women's war victims. And we collect the data, and from there, all the humanitarian organization, coined the term this rape as a weapon of war. I think rape is not just for sexual desire, because they are raping from a 4.5 years girl up to 85 years old woman, ladies, So it's not about the sexual desire anymore. It's more about to humiliate other fellow humankind, So this is the experience that we have, But recently I went back to Bosnia, and I met few children that we taken care during the war. I don't recognize them actually. Some of them become doctors, lawyers. This is what drives me, This is what drives me to be a humanitarian worker. You cannot see the result today. No, you cannot see the result today. But as per my experience, I can see the result, from what we are doing last time, with all these kids, kids from the rape victims, kids that they don't have any opportunity for the studies. But when with our assistants, now they become doctors, lawyers. Alhamdulillah. So this is what we want for MRA Siswa, from our fellow humanitarian workers. In the future, I really hope youth in our country will continue to serve and give back to their communities in any way possible. You don't have to have a certain certificate to serve. You only need a heart full of grace. This is the thing that I think MRA Siswa can play a very big role, in recruiting youth to be part of our humanitarian organization, to be part of, to be a social workers or humanitarian workers to assist the needy and the vulnerability. And I always like to mention, I also want to mention about one thing that I think that will drive the humanitarian workers. What drives humanitarian workers is the satisfaction you have when you assist other people, and the network that you build all over the world. For example, when we have a very big flood, recently, we had a very big flood recently. A few of our contact, our network previously that we worked before, send the aid to us, because they know that we are working in this region. For example, we are working in Indonesia, so they send aid to us, through us. So a lot of them from Denmark, from UK, and some of them from US. So Alhamdulillah. So this is how you can build your own network. I hope you can build your own network and move forward from there. Not only with MRA itself, but for other organizations. So I think I would like to thank you again, to MRA Siswa, and on behalf of MRA President Dr. Muhammad Abdul Sulaiman and MRA ESCO members, I want to congratulate MRA Siswa for putting a lot of effort into this amazing and well thought event. Alhamdulillah, there's a way to go. Inshallah. I think you have a power to go there because you're still young. When I start doing my working with a humanitarian organization, I'm still young, like your age, but now I can say a bit senior, So we want to pass over all our expertise, all our experiences to all our youth, inshallah. Thank you. Thank you for organizing this event, and thank you very much. Thank you everybody who work somewhere or another to make this event even good, inshallah. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
All right, thank you so much, Don Haji Khairil. I think your speech was really inspiring, and I was honestly really touched to hear your story on how you have persevered in humanitarian work all these years, especially when you said you started since you were around our age. So it's really inspiring to see how far you have come over the years. And also would like to just take this opportunity to thank you as well as your team in MRA for the constant support and guidance towards MRA Siswa ever since the beginning of MRA Siswa. So thank you so much once again, Tuan Haji Khairil. Thank you for your inspiring speech.
Oh my God.
All right, next up, allow me to introduce our next very special guest as well, Yang Amat Mulia Tunku Zain Al-Abidin Ibni Tuanku Muris. He is the founding president of the Institute for Democracy and Economic Affairs Malaysia, an economic and public policy research non-profit organization that has contributed greatly towards policy making in Malaysia. Besides that, Yang Amat Mulia Tunku Zain is also a trustee of Yayasan Chowkit, Yayasan Munara, and the Jeffrey Chia Foundation. He has experience working with the British Parliament, World Bank, United Nations Development Programme, UNDP for short, and the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. We are really honored to have him here with us today, and let us welcome Yang Amat Mulia Tunku Zain for the keynote session.
Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum everyone. Very good morning. Salam al-Hijrah. Thanks to Arman for inviting me to this summit. And he invited me via Instagram, which is quite rare that I even opened my mailbox on Instagram, but somehow I saw this message, and then the invitation came by email. So I'm very happy to be here. Very glad to meet MRA Siswa and to learn about what you guys are doing. I've looked at your event brochure. You have some really fantastic speakers. So it's going to be a really good day for all of you, I'm sure. I want to thank Azida for that a wonderful introduction, and I'll be touching on something that she said earlier. But I also want to pick up on something that Tuan Haji Khairil said. I too was in Bosnia 2-3 months ago, and I think what Tuan Haji mentioned about that generational impact is really very something that speaks to some of the work that we're doing in Malaysia and some of our other organizations as well. So in Yayasan Chowkit, for example, I've been there as a trustee for 11-12 years now, and what you can see is very, as Tuan Haji said, it's very, very hard to measure the impact of a contribution or volunteerism that you did 10 years ago, because those people who you were you were helping have grown up. They're doing very many other things, and in many cases doing many good things and giving back to the community. And in the case of Chowkit, for example, many of our alumni actually returned back to the community and repeating that cycle of virtue. But what Tuan Haji said is that it's very hard to sort of pinpoint. It's very hard to identify, if we did not intervene 10 years ago, how different would their lives have been today? And that's something that's very difficult to assess, something very difficult to quantify. And as you embark on your volunteerism, I think you have to bear in mind that that satisfaction that comes from volunteerism is something that is best known to yourself in many cases, right? It's best known to yourself because the recipients are too young to really be able to understand who you are and why you're doing this. And it's only down the line, 10 years later, a generation later, that the contributions that have been made begin to have that virtuous cycle of benefit. And I think I want to use that to segue into the first point I wanted to make in my speech today. And these are sort of 3 observations that I've had about volunteerism, especially in the last 2-3 years, with COVID happening, with the floods happening. So, number one, one piece of advice which I've sort of come to value, which is don't judge those who seem to be doing nothing, right? And one of the things exacerbated by COVID, during the movement control orders, And of course, with that, the proliferation of social media, right? And the need for people to show what they're doing on social media. And sometimes I felt that good deeds became performative, right? Everyone wants to show that, I'm doing something good because of COVID and the floods. And so, of course, many friends want to do things to help, but many people also want to be seen to be doing things to help. And yet, from what I saw and what I've learned in the post-COVID era now, the majority of contributions in cash, in kind, in services, in being on the ground actually came from those who did not, or in many cases could not, share the extent of their contributions, the extent of the volunteerism. And in many cases, actually, those who, they could not because they would lose their job, right? I think there's some sectors during COVID where people were prevented, some people in certain sectors were prevented from openly showing, what they were doing outside their jobs or outside their, outside their government roles, to say it in another way. Otherwise, they would actually be at risk for doing the job. So that what I'm saying is there are people who make enormous contributions. Not only do they not talk about it, but they also are doing it at risk to their own careers. Now, that also goes on to my second observation, which is don't condemn those who do post about their good deeds on social media, right? Which is the flip side, because the other thing that I've realized, of course, is that the act of sharing a case, the act of sharing a situation, is something that leads many other people to contribute as well. And we've all seen how, these viral cases of people, kids who need surgery, or during the floods, how a particular house needed repairs and so on. And so by sharing things on social media, actually many other people end up contributing. And of course, that is a good effect. And a good case can be made that, sharing what good you're doing on social media cajoles other people to do good things as well. And the last thing, which is, I think, carrying on from that, is that appreciate that people contribute in different ways. And that's all right. I think it's permissible to channel your own interests and your own talents into charity. And, some people have great ideas. Some people are good at art. Some people are good at writing. Some people like to really slog it out on the ground, with the broom, cleaning things up, or, directing people to, marshalling the resources of people to split them into teams and so on. Some people are really good at raising money. Some people have a lot of money and want to donate it, right? So I think successful volunteerism needs all of these elements. So coming back to MRA Siswa's sort of objective, you want to cultivate a generation of individuals who are aware of the importance of student volunteerism, and you do this across 6 focal areas, I realize. So as you seek to do this, be mindful of the different skill sets and the different backgrounds, and don't be too cliquey. I think that's the other thing. So I haven't been involved with the Malaysian Relief Agency, although I know, I'm aware of the work they've been doing over the years and over the generations. I have been more involved with Rotarians and Rotaractors. I've also, joined Lions and Cubs. I've been to many events by JCI, Junior Chambers International, and countless school and university-based organizations. And inevitably, sometimes, politics and personalities can sometimes detract from the larger mission. So, another reminder, always to stay attuned to the bigger picture in mind. And if you're seeking positions on the committee, understand that, social friction, egos are always going to be present. But if you remind yourself always that the reason you're doing any of this is because you're trying to give back to society and improve the lives of Malaysians, and indeed, of course, non-Malaysians who are in Malaysia, and have your eye on that ball. And if you do that, the potential for impact is enormous. Earlier, I mentioned the role of social media in raising awareness, but also a great catalyst are cross-sector partnerships. And I guess I want to give 3 examples that arose from COVID and the floods. So remember at the beginning of the MCO, there was a lot of confusion as to who would be allowed on the roads, right? Who would be allowed out of the house, who would be allowed to drive out. And so what we saw is a call, very desperate calls for concern, because a lot of orphanages, a lot of homes, a lot of refugee centers, autism care centers, all of these, and of course, Ideas we have our autism center as well. So a lot of us were worried about supplies, right? How are we going to make sure that the kids get food, medicine, blankets, and everything that they need to get through during COVID. So a call was put out. How are we going to coordinate this? Because now we have all these restrictions. You don't want the PDRM to turn us away when we get to a checkpoint. And so what happened was the most amazing thing, right? People who had authorization to travel and to cross the district borders and the state borders actually came out on social media, coordinated with each other, and coordinated with the suppliers, right? The suppliers of the medicine. And there were partnerships with, with providers of vegetables, other, rice, and so on and so forth. And so you had this great system, I think, in the first month of MCO, of people who would pick up these things and deliver these things, and ultimately create trust, right, between the voluntary sector as well as the corporate sector as well, which is an extent of cooperation which we hadn't seen before. And so that's one example. Second example is also during COVID. We came to learn at Ideas, we came to learn of the fact that many hospitals did not have the equipment that they needed, right? And so I think many of you may recall there was a viral video from a nurse, an anonymous nurse, talking about the desperate situation in the hospitals, right? So there weren't enough beds, not enough PPE, not enough testing kits. And so, again, this is one area where secret volunteers, anonymous volunteers, made a huge difference, because I don't want to get into a long story, but basically public hospitals, there was an issue with public hospitals, or the management of public hospitals sharing publicly what they needed because of government rules. Of course, that's a problem in itself. But what happened as a result is that we had a team of volunteers to research, at the height of the COVID pandemic, what it is that hospitals needed, and to relay that information to us and to donors, so that we could procure this stuff and then donate it to the hospital. So I think the key link there was getting that information, and that wouldn't have happened without volunteers stepping up, because they were on the ground and they could see for themselves, what is it that these hospitals needed. And the third example I'm going to give about these new cross-sector partnerships was during the floods, right? End of last year, beginning of this year, when you had those horrible floods. Again, one of the key, one of the key actors here were those volunteers who were first on the scene, who could see that, and who could assess what equipment was needed most urgently and where. And so you had these, spreadsheets coming up to give addresses of where the help was needed, to say, this area in Cheras needs certain provisions, and you can only get there by boat, right? You can only get there on a kayak, right? So we saw these amazing inventiveness of Malaysians, getting their kayaks out in order to get supplies to people who are on their rooftops while emergency services arrive. So those are just three examples from the last 2 years of how the ability to mobilize quickly, the ability to coordinate with others has led to these solutions. And many of these partnerships have evolved into friendships, and many of these partnerships still continue to this day. So it's really now the challenge is to make sure that those things are sustainable in the long term, because at any given moment, right, we know that there's going to be more natural disasters. We know that there's always going to be a chance of another pandemic happening. So banking on these experiences and being able to mobilize them at a moment's notice is really going to save lives in the future. Now, the partnerships are not just between the third sector and businesses, but also the wider community of the third sector as well, academics, research-based organizations, and think tanks like Ideas. So one of the other things that we realized is that after the dust had settled, right, after all of these experiences had been gleaned, after all of these, after all of this data had been gathered, actually, those of us who work in improving public policy in Malaysia are then able to formulate better policy proposals based on all of this wealth of data. And of course, influencing public policy itself requires relentless efforts from stakeholders. You need researchers to provide data. You need writers to translate that research into an accessible form. You need advocates to bring visibility to media and to MPs. If that fails, you need activists to use more provocative means to draw attention sometimes. And over the years, through the journey of Ideas, we've seen how these various parts of the third sector have become ever more permanent in Malaysian democratic life. Civil society is here to stay, and it's vital that the next generation of Malaysians is equipped with the tools to truly harness its potential. So congratulations to the Malaysian Relief Agency, and of course to you guys, to Siswa, for organizing this summit. And just to conclude, earlier Azida mentioned the fact that inflation, the rising cost of living is really, really having an impact on volunteer organizations as well, because all of these organizations rely on donations and the ability to purchase these items and to engage professionals who can provide services, right, in many of these communities. So how then do we make sure that there is a long-term future for volunteerism in Malaysia? I think, just as companies and government are responding to consumer and citizen behavior with regard to environment, ethical eating, sustainability, and other social causes, I have noticed as well that employers are also realizing that more and more workers, especially young professionals, actually want to take time to give back to communities, right? So I'm beginning to see how companies are sort of embedding opportunities for volunteerism into the contracts that they sign with employees, right? So I think it's a very good sign that the private sector is sort of understanding that is what that is becoming normalized, right? And that is what increasingly what young workers want to do. So that's I think continue to do that, continue being visible, and I'm very, very happy to engage with MRA Siswa after this. If you want to talk about how ways in which public policy can be further improved to facilitate the sustainability of volunteerism. So I think that's all I want to say by means of my keynote. Thank you very much. Congratulations. I really look forward to hearing what you're going to do next. So wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum.
Thank you so much, Yang Amat Mulia Tunku Zain, for the really thought-provoking speech. You have definitely shared many insights on some of the advices that we can all take away, especially in the field of humanitarian services. And the first point you have mentioned about was to firstly not to judge on people who do not seem to be doing anything because they're not sharing it to their friends and families or even like on social media, right? Because they might be doing things behind the scenes and not many people might know of. And the next point would be to not condemn on those who actually do post on social media, because the act of posting on social media would actually be a catalyst to really pull in resources from different areas and could also lead to very meaningful partnerships with different cross sectors as well. And lastly, it would also lead to much more resources that are put together, and it leads to everyone working together for a core mission, which is to bring further impact to different communities in the country. And yeah, it's a really good sign, as what you have mentioned earlier, that private sectors are really seeing the importance in working together with different sectors in terms of doing humanitarian work as well. And I'm really looking forward to see how these collaborations would really bring better impact to the country as well. So once again, thank you so much to Yang Amat Mulia Tunku Zain for the really inspiring speech. All right, so before we move on to the next segment, we would really like to invite the speakers, Yang Amat Mulia Tunku Zain, Tuan Haji Khairil, Miss Azida, and as well as Arman, the organizing chairperson of Siswa Empowerment Summit, and Atira, who is the director of Siswa Empowerment. So we would like to invite all of us for a quick photo taking session. All right, okay. All right, so I'll count to 3 and I'll be taking it, yeah? All right, 1, 2, 3. All right, one more. 1, 2, 3. All right, thank you so much to the speakers. We are very honored to have you guys here on our Siswa Empowerment Summit. So we'll be moving on to the next segment. To all our participants, are you guys ready for the next segment of our agenda? I'm sure that some of you guys would know what's next, right? So yeah, we'll be having Kalpana Dance Theatre to be presenting us with a Bharatanatyam performance. So just a brief info on Kalpana Dance Theatre. It was established in the year 1998 and is currently located in Brickfields, Kuala Lumpur. So they offer various types of dance classes such as Bharatanatyam and Odyssey. So the Kalpana Dance Theatre strives to be in the forefront of Indian dance through consistently having performances that showcase talents from all over the world. So just to share with you guys on a fun fact, it's that one of our MRA Siswa directors, Shobita, who is from the culture department, is also one of the dancers who you'll be seeing performing the Bharatanatyam dance alongside with her dance team. So it sounds really exciting, right? Okay. So I know we are all really looking forward to see the dance. So yeah, without further ado, let's welcome Kalpana Dance Theatre.
Janani janani ஜகத்தாரணி பூரணி நாரணியே ஜனனி 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 கான வினோதினி கான வினோதினி கான வினோதினி காமாட்சி கான வினோதினி காமாட்சி கான வினோதினி காமாட்சி கமல திருப்பதமே பணிந்தேனுதினமே வரமருளும் கமல திருப்பதமே பணிந்தேன் அனுதினமே வரமருளும் ஜனனி 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 கான வினோதினி காமாட்சி கான வினோதினி காமாட்சி கமல திருப்பதமே பணிந்தே அனுதினமே வரமருளும் ஜனனி 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 ஜகத்தாரணி பூரணி நாரணியே ஜனனி 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 ஜகத்தாரணி பூரணி நாரணியே ஜனனி 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 பாடி பாடி உந்தன் பாதம் பணிந்து வந்தேன் பார்வதியே பரமேஸ்வரியே கோடி கோடி கும்பம் ஓடி ஒளிந்திடும் உந்திழி பார்வையிலே பாடி பாடி உந்தன் பாதம் பணிந்து வந்தேன் பார்வதியே பரமேஸ்வரியே கோடி கோடி துன்பம் ஓடி ஒளிந்திடும் உன்விழி பார்வையிலே பாடி பாடி உந்தன் பாதம் பணிந்து வந்தேன் பார்வதியே பரமேஸ்வரியே கோடி கோடி துன்பம் ஓடி ஒளிந்திடும் உன்விழி பார்வையிலே பாடி பாடி உந்தன் பாதம் பணிந்து வந்தேன் பார்வதியே பரமேஸ்வரியே கோடி கோடி துன்பம் ஓடி ஒளிந்திடும் உன்விழி பார்வையிலே கடை கண் பாராயோ கருணை பொழிவாயோ கடை கண் பாராயோ கருணை பொழிவாயோ பாடலே சந்திரிய நாயகியே அடைக்கலம் வந்தேன் பார்வதியே பரமேஸ்வரியே கோடி கோடி துன்பம் கோடி ஒளிந்திடும் உன்விழி பார்வையிலே கடை கண் பாராயோ கருணை பொழிவாயோ கடை கண் பாராயோ கருணை பொழிவாயோ பாடநேசம் பிரியநாயகியே அடைக்கலம் அடைந்தேன் காத்தருள் ஜனனி 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 ஜகதாரணி பூரணி நாரணியே ஜனனி 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 ஜகதாரணி பூரணி நாரணியே ஜனனி 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 ஜனனி
Wow, wasn't that such a cool performance, guys? I don't know about you guys, but I'm really, really impressed by the dance and like people in general who can dance well. I'm just really impressed. And if you guys look at the chat box, Shobita, who is one of the dancers from the dance team, she has also very kindly put in the backstory about the dance and trying to explain on how it's actually a praise to the goddess of Devi. And I think it's such a beautiful story that really helps us understand the dance better. Let us know in the comments how you guys felt about the dance. Whether did you guys enjoy it as much as I did, because I definitely did enjoy it. All right. Okay, I see a lot of people enjoying the dance. That's nice to see. All right, so I'm sure Shobita and her dance team will be really, really happy to see that you guys have really enjoyed it. So once again, thank you so much to Kalpana Dance Theatre for such a beautiful performance. I'm sure everyone here has thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think most of us have become fans of the Kalpana Dance Theatre after this, right? All right, so guys, unfortunately, that will be the end of our performance segment, and we'll be moving on to the next equally exciting session. We'll be having a panel session next, moderated by Mr. Arman Hussain. So Arman is the organizing chairperson of the Siswa Empowerment Summit and currently serves as the deputy president of MRA Siswa. Mr. Arman is also a recent graduate from the Columbia University and will be furthering his studies as a Rhodes Scholar in the University of Oxford, pursuing a master's in economics for development. So without further ado, I'll be passing the floor to Mr. Arman for the next session.
Thank you, Adriel, for that flattering introduction. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning. Salam al-Hijrah, everyone, and welcome to the Siswa Empowerment Summit 2022. So when I was tasked with putting together and moderating a panel discussion, the first thought that came to mind was how to be more forward-thinking and this sense of hopefulness in a post-COVID Malaysia. So as the country and the world reopens, many parties are putting their heads together to figure out how to future-proof themselves, right? And volunteers in the third sector have definitely been challenged in many different ways during the pandemic, which is why I think they don't have the opportunity to sit down and discuss how to really go about this and cope with the changing post-pandemic world. Therefore, I'm ecstatic to present to you this panel discussion on the future of volunteerism and the third sector. I'm truly excited to introduce every single one of the panelists who will unpack the topic with us today. But before that, let's briefly get into the logistics of the session. So for the first hour or so, we'll be asking a series of general and panelist-specific questions, and our panelists will take turns answering them. But as you may have noticed, we're 15 minutes behind schedule, but we'll play it by ear. This will be followed by a Q&A session. So members of the audience, if at any point you have a comment to make or questions to ask the panelists, what you do is you click on the Slido link that will be sent in the chat box. You can also upvote and downvote questions. So go ahead and do that to make sure your burning questions are answered, as the more popular questions will be tackled first. And after that, we'll proceed with some concluding thoughts and final remarks. And finally, of course, a short photo session before we go on a short break. Now that the logistics of the session is out of the way, let me introduce you to the esteemed panelists that we have with us today. We'll start with Ms. Nisha Terumalai, who has been working with marginalized groups for the past 10 years. She has worked with various UN agencies such as UNHCR, UNICEF, and the International Labour Organization. Ms. Nisha has worked in several countries, including the Middle East and Africa. She remains dedicated to advancing human rights and is currently focusing on the gender, peace, and security field. Welcome, Ms. Nisha. Next, we have Ms. Alia Aisha Fadil, who is a crisis support officer at Women's Aid Organization. So formerly, Ms. Alia was a business engagement manager at Earthworm Foundation, where she works on supporting companies to find solutions to environmental and social challenges all across the value chain. Other past experiences include business operations and development in technology startups in the United States. Alia is a McKinsey & Company Next Generation Women Leader, NGWL, and a Young Southeast Asian Leaders Initiative Academy and Fulbright University Vietnam Fellow. Welcome, Alia. And next, we have Ms. Zulaika Zulkifli, who joined Mercy Malaysia in 2021 with over 1 decade of diverse career experience in the education and higher education sector. Her previous role with Lipat Services, an education services provider, entails progress reporting and engagement of internal and external stakeholders for the school transformation program. And throughout her career, Zulaika has continued to focus on causes close to her heart. She brings her decade of experience to her current role in Mercy Malaysia as the head of Volunteer Management Department. Besides local missions during emergency and recovery phase and several mobile clinics, she has been involved as a volunteer in Cambodia. Assalamualaikum, welcome, Ms. Zulaika. And last but not least, we have Dr. Vela Pandian Ponusami, who holds a PhD in sports psychology from the University of Western Australia in Perth and currently has served at the Institute for Youth Research Malaysia as Chief Executive Officer since 2019. His career objective is to achieve high caliber organizational results and personal development that is in line with the organization's vision and mission by utilizing sports science and expertise knowledge, i.e. sports psychology, leadership skills, mentoring, and training experiences, along with his communication, interpersonal, and consultative skills. Welcome, Dr. Vela. We're so happy to have all 4 of you joining this panel discussion today. But before we get into the meat of the discussion, let's first get some of the definitions out of the way. So there are 2 very important terms that I think we need to start defining or attempt to define. The first one being volunteerism or volunteer. Of course, there are lots of definitions out there, but I'm just going to share my favorite definition, which is from Volunteering Australia, which defines the act of volunteering as time willingly given for the common good and without financial gain. And the reason why this is my favorite definition, because I think it really hits the 2 nails on the head there, which are common good. That has to be the implication of volunteering, because if you're doing something but it doesn't serve or advance the agenda for the common good, do we really call that volunteerism, right? And the second would be without financial gain. How true is that, right? So stay tuned. We'll unpack this question in the panel discussion later. And now let's move on to the second term that I want us to start thinking about, the third sector, the future of which we will be talking in the next 40 or 45 minutes or so. So this is a diagram from a research paper by Branson et al. In 2005 that tries to locate the third sector within what we call this welfare triangle. So you have the 3 agencies, the state, the market, and the community, and then 3 lines separating the profit and non-profit, formal and informal, and public and private. And as you can see, the private sector is right in the middle. And I think this captures really what I understand of the third sector and what makes the third sector appealing to me as a student who doesn't know what he wants to do with his life, right? So you get a taste of all these different things, interacting with public agencies, with the market or private firms, as well as the community, before you deciding what you want to do after graduating. And that is why I personally believe that the third sector is the best place for students to be in, especially when they're in an exploratory mode and haven't really decided on what to do or commit to in the next 10 to 20 years when they embark on this professional career development process, right? So now that we got the definitions out of the way, let's kickstart our panel discussion. So we've defined volunteerism and the third sector. Of course, there can be some debates as to, do you agree with that definition? But maybe we can get to the meat of the question. Why do third sectors and volunteerisms exist in the first place, right? Because it seems to me from that diagram that we just saw, it exists merely to fill in the gaps left by the public, private, and the community sector. And if these gaps are addressed, they can render the third sector obsolete, right? So I'm curious to know what the panelists think about, what the purpose of third sectors and volunteerism, and if you think there is a future for the third sector. Maybe ultimately the end is to render the third sector obsolete, because that means we've already reinforced the existing institutions such that there is no need for the third sector to begin with. Maybe we can start with Ms. Alia, if you have any opening thoughts for us.
Hi, Arman. Thank you so much for starting with me. I think for me, I actually come with this perspective on a personal basis. I feel like exactly as you highlighted that when you're a student, right, and you're in the exploratory phase, and you're already facing multiple different pressures from multiple different angles. And I think that's why the sector will thrive because of that, it is a safe space for us to kind of try things, especially at a young age. This is the time to get the exposure, and also it gives us an opportunity to find ourselves as well through this process. And I think that's, in my personal opinion, has been my journey. And I'm keen to hear what the rest of the panelists have to share.
All right, thank you for sharing. I'm glad that we started this panel discussion with a very optimistic note, right? Because it really challenges the assumptions that the topic is making. The future of volunteerism in the sector, is that even a future worth discussing at this point? But let's see if Ms. Nisha agrees.
Yeah, actually, I think sometimes the third sector exists because there is an absence of legal framework surrounding certain issues. For example, if you're talking about the refugee cause in Malaysia, Malaysia is not a signatory to the Refugee Convention, so there's that gap there. There's the missing element of a legal framework to protect this particular vulnerable group. So that's why third sectors are important, and they will continue to thrive because some communities' needs are not met by the government or the private sector.
Okay, amazing. I just want to bring in Ms. Zulaika as well, because Ms. Zulaika is working with Mercy Malaysia. And I think Mercy Malaysia is one of the most prominent humanitarian organizations out there that have been working with marginalized communities. So maybe Ms. Zulaika can attest to the fact that there is a future for the third sector, and there is a continuous need for, Mercy being around the next 10 to 20 years to serve the different communities that Mercy is already serving.
Thank you, Arman. I think that third sector exists due to the emergence of the volunteerism in the country or any other country in particular. So as I think young people nowadays, they become more empowered and more involved in the community. So I think this is why the third sector exists. And I don't think it should be seen as, this is my personal opinion, I don't think it should be seen as a filling in the gap in any of the other sectors, but I think it should be seen as, complement or strengthen the other sectors as well. So yeah, this is what my personal view is.
Very interesting. I just want to bring Dr. Vela in because there is these two assumptions, or I guess two schools of thought, whether we see the third sector as filling in gaps left by the other sectors, or there is sort of like a collaboration between all the three different sectors. So Dr. Vela, my opinion, or maybe like the opinions of many other people out there, the third sector exists precisely because there are things that the government cannot do or is not doing. Maybe that's a premise that you agree with or you don't. But how would you describe the relationship between the government and the organizations in the third sector? is the government threatened by these organizations, or would they be supportive of it?
Thank you very much. I think it's a good opportunity for me to be here with you guys as well. I think this is a bit unique, questions, and I think it is good for me to advise and also to recommend that the third sector and volunteerism should exist and should continue to exist. Why? Because it is not for the purpose of filling up the gap between what the government has not done the job or whatever. I think it should exist because you look into the populations now. Let's say, for example, I give you one scenario. Malaysian youth within the age of 15 to 30 years, we have got roughly 1/3 of the Malaysian population, which is 10.02 million. If you're looking at the age of 15 to 40, so we have got 15.25 million youth members. Why I emphasize on the youth, because most of the volunteer works and all that is between this age group. So I think the government itself, you're looking at the government itself, they cannot afford to do all this volunteer job by themselves. I think the corporate companies, the NGOs and all that should come together in one mission to help, the flood victims, the other sectors which need them. So I think the government and NGOs should work together. This is one of the initiatives which has been, highlighted in the national youth policy as well, working not in silo, working across the government agencies, between the NGOs and also the government agencies to support the idea. It should continue together.
Right. Thank you for the input, Dr. Vella. Now that we've already sort of briefly talked about whether there is a future for the third sector, right? I think it would be fruitful to now shift gears a bit and talk about the trends and projections of how the third sector have evolved over the years, so that we can come up with, I guess, more concrete recommendations or, I guess, predictions of what will happen in the next 10 to 20 years. I'm just going to stay with you very quickly, Dr. Vella, because you mentioned about the mutualistic relationship between the third sector and government. So can you maybe share with us how the third sector and student volunteerism fit into the larger government agenda? And to be more historical, how have government policies on youth and students changed over time? And how instrumental are the third sector and volunteering activities in driving or contributing to this change? You did mention very briefly about the national youth policy, but maybe there are more specifics that we can get into, or other policies that we're not aware of at the moment.
Yeah, thank you. One of the main, in the national youth policy 2015 to 2035, the 20 years blueprint. So they have stated one of the component which has been stated in the 9 main area which they have already identified. One of them is volunteerism. So that means volunteerism is one of the main aspects which has been given an emphasis. So I think that is already strong point why we should exist, and it cannot be done just by the government, and it should be done in a more structured way. Sometimes we go according to the problems. Sometimes when you have any scenarios, then you go about it. So it should be in a more structured way, and then it should be equal support from the government itself in terms of the funding, in terms of the proper training, because most of the volunteers' job is also need some sort of funding and also formal training. Without that, sometimes it happens to be, I've seen so many volunteers involved in the programs and all that. But sometimes, it's just sitting down around and not working and not instructed in a proper way, So I think the government, NGOs and all that should work together to make sure that, if you really want to emphasize on this, you should have some structured way of doing things. and also a proper funding. I think from like you guys, MRA and some Mercy Malaysians and all these people, you guys are doing some volunteers project. So I think you should come forward, work with the government agencies. I can't comment much on the other government agencies because they do have volunteer programs as well, but I can't comment much on them because but what I can share with you guys, under the Ministry of Youth and Sports, we got a bigger wing. If you remember this word Rakan Muda, Rakan Muda, so far we have already got 300 over 1,000 people registered throughout Malaysia, and we have been since 1994 we have been engaged in volunteerism works and all that. So I think people who are involved in this sort of initiative should come forward with the Ministry of Youth and Sports, to see what we can do together to leverage on this in a more appropriate way. So there is so many programs I will share in the later part as well. So many programs that we have already have in place. All these are purely on a volunteerism as well. So there is an opportunity for the youth to participate because, based on the research that, I could able to share later on from the various questions as well. Looking into the age group, like 15 to 24, 15 to 39. So you have a number of people getting involved. I think the highest numbers, if you look into getting involved in a volunteerism, is between the 19 and 23. When we did a survey from the age of 14 to 39, so we see the highest percentage is from 19 to 23 years of people from the IPT and also from the schools, getting involved in the volunteer jobs, and then 28.4% are among them from the universities. So that is not enough, actually. It should encourage the universities. So I think that Form 5 students at the school level and also the university level, I think they should be given an opportunity. Like for example, one of the study done, scholar at the school level, secondary school level, we have got roughly around 60% of them getting involved, and also in IPT 23%. So that shows some higher range of people participating in sports. So these are the group of students and also people that should be encouraged to get involved, because from the grassroots level, then it becomes a habit when they grow up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very reassuring, Dr. Bella. And I think the reason why this question is even asked is because I personally have been a part of a number of student-led organizations, especially those related to volunteering. And a common sentiment that I've been getting, internally, and also I felt coming from my colleagues in those organizations, is that there hasn't been a lot of touch point with government agencies. But that's understandable because student-led organizations, most of them are not even registered with ROS or ROI. And even if they are, they tended to be in infancy and less stable compared to more mature organizations like Malaysian Relief Agency or Mercy Malaysia or MRA, right? And I think MRA Siswa is lucky enough because we are attached to a more established organization with full-time staff and consistent funding. But that is not a privilege that a lot of other independent student-led organizations have. So what you mentioned just now, I think is reassuring to everyone on this call that the government is looking to work with this organizations in the sector, whether it's student-led or otherwise, right? But there needs to be some standards that you need to subject yourself to make this partnership work and has as much impact as possible. Yes, Dr.
Well, one point that I wanted to highlight, because since I think I saw Mercy Malaysia is here, and then MRA and all that. One thing that you guys can do is, like, for example, if you have proper NGOs, working in a various youth development programs or projects, especially the volunteerism and all that. So the registered one, you can go into our website, the Ministry of Youth and Sports. to register in of course you have to go to ROS and all that, and then you register officially in our platform, and you can get some funding to organize your programs, and you are talking about any volunteer programs outside, because as I mentioned earlier, Ministry of Youth and Sports itself, or any other ministry, we can't afford to do huge number of programs. We need you guys to come in. So, and definitely you need funding, and definitely you need a manpower and all. So we have the manpower, we have the funding, not a big amount of money, but could able to sustain some small projects and all that. So you can able to do that, go into the proper platform, get some funding, and also, you can organize your programs accordingly.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Dr. Vela. Everyone, take notes. Take good notes. I just want to bring this conversation back to the ethos of this part of the planning session, which is on trends and projections. So let's start with Ms. Zulaika first. How would you describe the state of student volunteerism and the third sector in Malaysia now compared to the last 10 to 20 years? I think it has definitely changed dramatically because of COVID, the way organizations run, the way we structure ourselves, and the causes that we're fighting or advancing. And given that we're exiting COVID right now, would this trend persist or change?
Thanks, Arman. Yes, I think definitely the overall volunteerism landscape has changed, and I think it will continue change as well in the future, especially these past few years due to the pandemic, as mentioned. For example, during the pandemic, you've seen that there are a large group of people who are stranded in their universities or other places who they are stranded, but they came together for collectively for a cause. And then I think one of the reasons why the overall landscape is changing due to the access to technology as well and social media. As I think recently, most recent example you can see is during the Klang Valley flood, where we have access to, suddenly you have in the news everywhere, in the social media, you can see that people are posting everywhere that support required and help required, which I think recent years, even though there are natural disasters as well, but you don't see these things in the social media that frequent or that large, on a large scale. So I think due to this, so people, especially young generations, they are more aware, and they are more aware of these issues, and hence I think which is why they are encouraged to be involved in as volunteer as well.
Thank you, Ms. Zulaika. Ms. Alia, same question.
Yeah, I think to kind of follow up what Ms. Zulaika said as well, I think the advancement of technology has also bred innovation. Like how we volunteer now may look very different from how we used to. Like in the best example is the Kita Jaga Kita kind of technology that was developed, and how there was just a group of people that kind of came together and was like, we're going to consolidate all of the people that need help, and this is how we're going to advance, the good cause and get people as much help as they can. So I think I personally am very optimistic. With the advent of social media as well, a lot more people are a bit more aware, and even if they are not aware, they are more willing to learn. And I think if we can continue that trend, we're going to see some positive changes moving forward. Yeah.
Amazing. But again, we seem to agree that because of COVID, there's this acceleration of digitalization and accessibility, and COVID does tie our fates together. But now, since we're exiting the pandemic, I think maybe in the near future, our fates will be less tied together, in the sense that COVID is not on everyone's mind gradually, right? So people are more free to explore other areas that may be of more of their interest, right? So for example, during COVID, we get people criticizing, the demonstrators who are demonstrating in Kuala Lumpur for issues like MP Lompat Party, whether for a specific legislation. But now, since COVID is no longer an issue, people are just pursuing their respective interests and passions, right? So that raises the question, to many, the work done in the third sector and volunteering organizations, they're driven by values and passions, right? So during COVID, it was mostly in response to something that's very urgent and pressing. So people might put their values and passions second to the logistical challenges that we're facing. But now that we have the options or more opportunities to pursue our values and passions, where do we draw the line between encouraging people to be more adventurous and entrepreneurial and selfless, and on the other hand, taking care of themselves and being realistic and just doing something for the betterment of the country and the social good, as opposed to, you know, what you're interested in? Maybe we can hear from Ms. Nisha.
Yeah, I think coming back again to the question of the pandemic, right? I think when the pandemic started, that's when a lot of people started talking about mental health. It started becoming, you know, people are more aware of, you know, how important your mental health is, how to take care of yourself and things like that. And that's the same thing as when it comes to like contributing to societies and things like that. I think it's important that I think when someone decides to volunteer, it always comes from good intention. You want to contribute to society, you want to, you know, do your part. But at the same time, you should always know your capacity and your limitations and try to have that balance. Don't overcommit, don't oversell yourself. There's always this need to do more because you think when you're volunteering, you're doing something good. So, you know, you go beyond what you're supposed to do. And I think that a lot of people find themselves in really tight situations when they overcommit, and then, you know, now they're forced to like, you know, do that. And especially like young volunteers, you know, I feel like a lot of young volunteers, when they are volunteering with an organization, they're always afraid to say no, because there's a lot of young volunteers look at volunteerism as a stepping stone to a career. And they're always afraid to say no because they're afraid that that may impact their future in finding a job with a different organization and things like that. So I feel like if you can't do it, it's okay to say that you can't cope or you can't do it, because at the end of the day, the world of volunteerism is something that you're doing voluntarily, and you are not obliged, or you are not, you know, it's not compulsory for you to do it. So if you can't do it, you have to always put yourself, your mental health first before you can help others. Like, you have to take care of yourself first before you can take care of others.
Yeah, Ms. Nisha, I think you raise a very important point here, which will be a running thread throughout the panel discussion. It's consistent with the theme for the summit, Empowered to Serve. You need to be able to upskill yourselves first, help yourselves first before you help others, right? I just want to bring Dr. Vela in at this point because, you know, there's this, on the one hand, you're pursuing your interests and values, you're doing it voluntarily. But on the other, there are external pressing needs for which we need volunteers, right? And I think the government plays a huge role in sort of like dictating which areas or which concerns and issues that we want to tackle first, and basically coming up with the cost prioritization. So I'm just curious to know if you think there are certain things that volunteers or third sector organizations should prioritize in tackling, or do you treat all causes and issues the same?
Thank you very much. I think before I start into these questions, let me just give you a little bit of like what Nisha mentioned earlier. I think that is a correct you know, answer for certain group of people, because I've seen a lot of people in terms of getting involved in volunteerism, but not for the sake of really helping people. And I wanted to stress one quote here for all of you, you know, because I think one of the main purpose we are here is to address the importance of the volunteers and all that. So I think the quote is very much, you know, aligned. It sounds like this: you make a living by what you get, but you make a life, but you know, by what you give. You know, this is not by me, but Winston Churchill. You know, so you know, it should be purely volunteer. It should not be forced by someone else. It should be you yourself decide to go in. And I think that is the fundamentals of volunteerism. So if you don't have the heart to help people, I think the idea of volunteerism is not really, aligned with the objective or mission or vision of any organization. So I think it comes from the individuals. If the individuals find that, it is not appropriate for them to, to get involved, and then they should decide from the beginning itself. I think that is something that I wanted to share with you guys, because I think it is not something that everyone should have on plate. It's all depends on individuals, how you want to, offer whatever additional time that you have, additional energy that you have, and additional money, maybe, if it is involved money, if you wanted to give as a charity to the people who really needs that. So all those things comes under the platform of volunteerism. So now I just wanted to, answer back Arman's question just now. Looking into the sectors which people get involved in terms of volunteerism. So I think the highest, based on the previous research, within the age of 15 to 40, so we find that, the area that a lot of our young people get involved in volunteerism is basically on the sports area, because that's the highest number of percentage shown. And the second was the social services. Okay, like, the flood victims, kebakaran, fires here and there, those, that is the second one. And then the third one is the NGOs getting involved in the youth organizational based activities. And also some cultural aspects, and also some religious related activities and all that. So these are some of the, and of course, health as well. These are some of the major area of people would like to get involved in the social work, in social work, and also volunteer works as well.
Wonderful. I just want to shift gears a bit, right? Because earlier, I think all the panelists touched on how volunteering or participating in third sector organizations really gives you the skills that you need to, craft a career progression for yourself after graduating. Ms. Nisha, for example, earlier mentioned that many students see volunteering as a stepping stone to making a good money after graduating, or pursuing careers after your studies. And maybe Dr. Vella can also attest the fact that volunteering really does upskill youth to an extent that allows them to become more productive members of the workforce. So, for example, IRIS conducted the inability of youth to compete in the economic sector study, which I think does really unpack the different reasons why today's youth are not as competitive in the labor force, and the steps that we can take to make them more competitive. But I just want to bring in Ms. Alia, because at one point you volunteered as crisis support officer while juggling a full-time job as a business engagement manager. So perhaps you can be the living example of volunteering affecting or informing your full-time work, and vice versa.
I think it goes back to actually one of the questions you asked before on how do we prioritize the different causes, right? For me, in my experience going through volunteering, it has been a very deep personal thing, which I think can also speak to a lot of the different volunteers that I've worked with. We found something that we said we're going to do this, not for the financial gain, and only at a time and that I can give, because again, as Nisha also emphasize that you cannot overextend yourself. Establishing healthy boundaries is the most important skill, not just in volunteering or in your workforce, but in your life in general. So I think that's one of the key skills that I've developed, kind of juggling both roles. I think, but going back to why I guess I decided to do it, is that I came back to Malaysia after being abroad for quite a number of years. And I realized that I was a bit out of touch with kind of what's going on the ground. And as somebody who's in international development, not fantastic if that happens. So trying to get back, into the community, understanding what are the needs, because ultimately there is this issue of also savior syndrome. You come in and you kind of want to enforce your own beliefs and what you want to see change. And that's not the best way to volunteer, because you need to understand first what the community needs from you. So at that time, even though I had a full-time job, I got lucky, I guess, because I was scrolling LinkedIn and I saw this opportunity to volunteer with Women's Aid. And it's only 4 hours a week at a time that best fits me. And for those of you who don't know what a crisis support officer is, our group of volunteers, we actually man the hotline. So if any of you know, Women's Aid organization actually has a hotline for sexual assault, domestic violence, any sort of gender-based violence for women and children to access. So having that kind of experience for me personally has helped me foster my empathy. How do I become fully present for the people I serve? Seeing as my day job is a business engagement manager, I work with clients anyway. So it's really understanding what are their needs, how can I help? My job is not to save anyone, my job is to guide them, to allow them to save themselves and their children and their needs. So I think that was one of the things that I really treasure, and one of the reasons I still continue the work that I do while having a full-time job. And the community that I've not only served, but I've also banded with at Women's Aid has been super, super powerful and super meaningful to my life, because being able to work with people who are like-minded, who are passionate about the cause, who are, trying to not only better society, but better themselves, I think allow us to show up and step up better as citizens of society in general.
Yeah, amazing. That really resonated with me, because I too studied abroad in the US for 3 years. I studied economics, and coming back to Malaysia during COVID, that really forced me to rethink my privileges and how out of touch I was when I was in the States. And joining MRA Siswa and getting to interact with the Orang Asli community or the urban poor community in Kuala Lumpur really opened my eyes to the state of the country. And it really informed me or prompted me to pursue development economics for my master's program at Oxford this coming October. And it made me realize that volunteering may not be sort of like a full-time job that you are pursuing, but it might be a stepping stone to something else that could really position you within that specific niche for the betterment of the country, like myself, becoming a Malaysian development economist. So that we don't have to rely on someone from a different country to tell us how to develop our country. So yeah, that's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that, Ms. Alia. But now that we've sort of like agreed there's work or value of work in volunteering, that begs the question whether there are pressing issues that we're facing regarding recognizing volunteering work as a form of labor that deserves some regulatory attention, right? Because perhaps volunteering work can be exploitative at times, or maybe that's not the case. But I'm curious to know what Ms. Nisha thinks, since you've done much work in the third sector and at the International Labour Organization and Fair Labour Association. So maybe you have some thoughts to share with us.
Yeah, so yeah, there are some pressing issues as to, how do we regulate volunteer work, right? Because volunteer work is not covered under the Employment Act. As you mentioned earlier, the definition itself is voluntarily providing services. So because of that, because it's not compulsory and because it's voluntary, it's difficult to develop a legal framework behind it, because volunteer work differs between individual, right? One person may commit more time, and the other person may have the expertise but can only commit to 1 hour to volunteer work per week. Okay, so those are the issues that makes it difficult to develop legal frameworks behind it. For example, working hours. What's the right amount of working hours for volunteer? How many hours per week should volunteers work? Because it differs between individuals. Now, with that said, because it lacks that legal framework to kind of protect volunteers, of course, volunteers are often exploited in many cases. I would say that the relationship between a volunteer and the entity that engaged the volunteer is one that is based on mutual agreement, one that has the services or the expertise to provide, and one needs that expertise or extra help. Now that becomes a problem when expectations and limitations are not clearly mapped out. That opens up this whole gray area where, you know, volunteers can be exploited. For example, like I mentioned earlier, working hours. You know, if an organization does not map out, like have an internal policy to state that, okay, volunteers in this organization are only allowed to work this amount of hours per week, then of course it opens that opportunity for the volunteer to be exploited. And apart from that, of course, working conditions is also another issue. Occupational health and safety is also another issue where, you know, you don't map out what a volunteer can and cannot do, then you will end up being in a situation where, you know, a volunteer is expected to do something that is dangerous and that is not protected by the organization and things like that. So these are all gray areas that a volunteer may face risks. And because of the term voluntary, that makes it very hard for a legal framework to be developed. But that's one of the reasons, all the more for for us to form a body to protect volunteers who are providing these services. Because, for example, it cannot be considered labor because if you look at the International Conference of Labor Statisticians, yeah, they listed that if you pay a volunteer, if you're paying more than 1/3 of the local wage, yeah, the local market wage, then it's considered paid. If it's considered paid, then it cannot be considered a volunteer work. It is considered work. So there's that catch-22 situation there, which makes it so difficult to develop legal frameworks behind volunteer work. So with that said, I think the best way that we can protect volunteers is to ensure that organizations develop their own internal policies to ensure that, you know, the volunteers that are working with them are somewhat protected. So individual organizations should have their own policies and conduct their own due diligence as to, you know, understand what is their capacity, what is their resource needs, and, you know, manage their resources properly so that volunteers that engage work with a particular organization or an entity, it's a win-win situation. You get the extra help that you need, and the volunteer get the experience or the expertise, or, you know, get to do something that they want or that is, you know, their passion voluntarily, so that, you know, there's no exploitation, both benefits from it, and most importantly, it serves the community that you're trying to serve.
Yeah, I think that is a very important question that a lot of people in the third organization are thinking about, right? Because in Malaysia specifically, I can think of two different things. One is the fact that we have this culture or power distance that make it us very susceptible to being exploited, whether you're a labor or a volunteer. Even if you're a labor who's paid, exploitation is rampant. So let alone if you're a volunteer without any regulatory attention, etc. And secondly, it's because the fact that we're not paying people to volunteer means that third sector organizations have to come up with alternative mechanisms to hold people accountable and incentivize them to do the work that they're supposed to be doing, that they signed up for. And human capital has been an issue that we at MRA Siswa constantly talk about in our senior management team meetings. The tenure is like 1 year long, and it's pretty hard to keep people motivated, especially at a time that is changing so fast, like during COVID, right? So let's ponder on that question a little bit longer, walking away from this conference and think of the ways that we can potentially address that. We're running short on time. We're supposed to be starting our Q&A session now, but I'm just going to let Ms. Alia, Ms. Zulaika, and Dr. Bella have a final say by asking 3 questions. So if you can just give very quick and concise answers. We'll start with Dr. Bella first. If you have anything to add or to address Ms. Nisha's point, go ahead.
One thing that, based on our discussion today, I think, I'm quite happy you mentioned the word power distance, because I think Malaysia is considered one of the Asian countries which has got a very high score in the power distance compared to any other Western culture and all that. So we're all aware the power distance is something limiting, people getting involved in certain activities, and then we always have that distance, even in the government, non-government and all that. So I think this is big part of our culture. So one thing that I wanted to highlight here, volunteer participation rate, in Malaysia, if you look into internationally compare, I think we still average less than 3%. That is the age between the age group of 15 to 15 years and above. If you compare to the most high income countries, some of the countries like Canada and all that, they've got 7%. So I think that is one fundamental issues that need to be addressed as well, because the number of people getting involved in volunteerism, even we see some of the organizations are engaging, but I think the percentage are still lower. That is one. Second thing is regards to, you mentioned about upskilling, reskilling and all that. I think based on our studies also, we find that, matching, work according to your qualification and all that, that is something need to be addressed as well, because that will help the people with the proper knowledge, education and all that to get involved in the volunteer works as well. And we need another platform, which is policy enhancement and also a structured platform, which I mentioned earlier. So I think without this, we can able to do and contribute to the volunteerism, but that will be a small scale level as well. So we need to enhance on that so that we could able to be. And last word from myself, I think Alia, and then from Mercy and also MRA, I think if you guys can use this platform, me, come over to Ministry of Youth and Sports. I can guide you guys in certain aspects in terms of how to get some funding to help in a smaller scale, on your whatever initiative that you guys are doing. So I can only say this to people that I know. So please come over and see us. We can guide you guys, because I think Ministry of Youth and Sports, they have got huge number of youth-related programs, like, if you guys heard about Remaja Perdana Rakan Muda, the Duke Edinburgh International Award. I think so far we have already got 22,969 recipients already. These are all purely on a volunteer works. So the award is given according to bronze, silver, gold to the people who get involved in the volunteer works. So you are awarded. So if anyone out there doesn't know about this, come over, get together with us, the Ministry of Youth and Sports. And then the next one, I think in terms of, we have MyCops, that is another one more service training programs that we are doing with different, countries. We have got 98 selected participants throughout the Malaysian youth to get involved. And next one, we have voluntary programs, we have such as Southeast Asian Sports Kuala Lumpur 2017, previous volunteers program that we have 8,198 volunteers has participated, and we have ASEAN Sports sports program 3,688 volunteers, and also Public University Rakan Muda Secretariat members. Since 2017, we have got 18,770 members, and recently MyWAC volunteers We have 250,763 volunteers registered under Ministry of Youth and Sports. And the last one, I think, Youth Movers, which we started in 2019 by Impact Malaysia. We have 119 volunteers. So I think the NGOs, the people who are doing volunteer works outside also can come in and join us to make sure that, you know, whatever the numbers that I gave is within the scope of what KBS, Ministry of Youth and Sports, is doing. So you guys can join us as well. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for the sharing, Dr. Vella. I just want to say Kementerian Belia dan Sukan is doing the Lord's work. I personally benefited from a lot of its programs. I did the Anugerah Remaja Perdana, the Edinburgh Award, and currently doing the Fellow Perdana program. So I highly encourage my peers out there to really seek for these opportunities and apply and participate to upskill, reskill yourself so that you can become more competitive in the future and advance social good. But let's just dwell a little bit on your point about upskilling and reskilling as we bring this conversation to a close. Just want to bring in Ms. Alia for your concluding remarks, final thoughts, and some recommendations, hopes for the future, because you're a crisis support officer at Women's Aid Organization. So you could attest to the fact that volunteers too need help or training before they can help others. And this aligns with the theme of the summit. You have to be empowered in order to serve. So if you can just very briefly tell us how has the Women's Aid Organization managed its volunteers, the challenges that you're facing, and from that, what support you offer and what recommendations would you give to volunteers out there?
Yeah, thanks so much. I think I'm also a part of the Generation COVID volunteers because I went through my entire training virtually, and I was actually quite skeptical whether I would be, you know, fully empowered and all these things. And I think it speaks to what Nisha said in terms of organization and having that internal system ready and the right policies to ensure that volunteers are not only empowered when they show up for their duty, but also that they feel I have the support system available if because nobody has all the answers, right? Especially if you're quite new to the area. So being able to have those training sessions, even now we have a WhatsApp group where we can ask questions like, hey, we had this case. All of us are bounded by a confidentiality agreement. So this is a safe space for us to talk to each other, ask for advice. And even if I wanted to call the head of partnerships right now at Women's Aid, she won't be happy, it's a Saturday, but she will pick up because that is kind of the spirit that they've kept for our volunteers, that you can ask for help. And with regards to recommendations, I actually have 3. The first is choose your cause. There's a lot out there, and I think as young people, we feel the pressure that this is, you know, we're doing this for the next generation, we have to do so much. It's okay if you just choose 1 or 2 that you're like, this is something that is close to me that I personally want to make change in. So I chose sustainability as my day job. I chose women's and children's right advocacy as my kind of night job at volunteering. And that's enough. Never let anyone kind of guilt trip you that you are not doing enough, because I think we hear that a lot. And that also then brings about burnout because you can't overstretch yourself over time. And second, as I mentioned before, and I'm a big believer of this, establish your strong support system. Nothing can happen. Rome is not built overnight. If that's why you have friends and loved ones, people who are like-minded individuals that can support you through this journey. There's going to be good days, there are going to be not so good days. And these are the people that you can lean on and also realize that you're not alone through this process. And third, start small. Even if it's that 1 hour, that 1 day, that one time, you'll be surprised how not only your life will be richer from it, but the lives of others. And yeah, that's all I can share truly from my experience, because I too am learning. So I really hope that this has been helpful to some of you attending today.
Wise words to live by. Thank you, Ms. Alia. Now let's end the panel discussion with Ms. Zulaika. Same question, but we can just reframe it slightly different. Slightly different. So as the head of the Volunteers Management Department of MRA Malaysia, you too have been seeing some challenges and problems with volunteers and the infrastructure created to facilitate this impact or value creation. So can you maybe share with us some of these challenges? And given your work in the education space, do you maybe think there should be like a revamp in the syllabus or some policy change that can encourage volunteerism amongst the youth and upskill them to do this more effectively. And if you can just share some concluding remarks, thoughts, and hopes for the future.
Thanks, Arman. Yeah, so on the first question, I think especially because of the pandemic, we realized that we cannot be everywhere all the time. So, and then also, I think one of the biggest challenge during the pandemic is having volunteers with the right skills at the right time. And as you know, doctors are, all the medical officers, nurses are all overworked. And then if we are starting a mobile clinic, it's quite a struggle to find a volunteers with medical background to support the mobile clinic. So I think one of the approach that we are taking is that we are looking into the total disaster risk management model, which expand not just during the disaster phase, but beyond that as well. Pre-disaster, so we are looking into prevention methods, preparedness, we're preparing all the committees. So we're engaging the committee leaders, the schools, the health infrastructure, the government, and also the private sectors as well. And then also extending the support post-disaster as well. So for all the developmental activities and programs as well. And on the second point, since you're asking if it should be embedded into the school's syllabus or programs, I think yes and no. If it's going to be just as a syllabus in another subject, I think definitely no, because I think this is also a sensitive issue that has been debated as well quite a while and forever. Because we all know that kids nowadays, they have too many subjects already. So if it's going to be just another subject, then I think it's definitely a no. However, I think it should start as young, just to cultivate the spirit of volunteerism among them. So I think what it can be is something similar to a community-based learning or project-based learning, whereby you can even actually have people from the industry, from the NGOs, or to come to the school and support the project-based learning or the community-based learning. And then if you can use that as a it should be something that's sustainable, because I think that then it has rather than just a one-off program. If you have just one-off program, and it will not be benefit the kids so much. Yeah. So I think that's just my thoughts. Thank you.
Panelists, thank you so much for your insights and for indulging me with my questions. I'm sure the audience have already sent in a lot of questions on our Slido link, so let's just shift gears and move to the Q&A section. I think we only have time for 2 or 3, so if the CER team can just share screen, and we'll see which are the more popular ones. So we'll start with the first one. Yeah, since we talk about, coming up with mechanisms to hold volunteers accountable and incentivizing them, I guess the natural question would be, how do you think we should think about rewarding or recognizing for volunteering within the third sector, so that people can continuously create values and contribute in the ways that they're comfortable doing, the way that they can do, but at the same time committing to like a certain project such that they see everything through. Ms. Nisha, if you can start with you.
Sorry, I lost you for a little bit.
Yeah, so the first question is about how do we reward or recognize volunteers within the third sector?
Okay, so I think how you reward and recognize volunteerism in the third sector is it should commensurate what is given. The least is that you should provide the volunteer with some sort of stipend that can cover their basic costs that requires them to carry out the tasks that you're asking them to do. For example, transportation and meals, and these are very basic items. Like try not to put any additional burden on the volunteer. Try to ease that burden of the transport cost of going to the place, or the meals in between performing the task and stuff like that. And I think most importantly is recognition of the volunteer that has contributed to your organization. Recognize their contribution and make it known. This is so important because we are human beings and we need to be constantly motivated. And with motivation, then it gives us drive to continue doing what we're passionate about. This recognition, letting the volunteer know that, their work is being recognized by the organization, that, that they are appreciated. I think that is first and foremost most important. And beyond that, monetary or, reimbursements of funds and all that should commensurate what the volunteer has put in order to carry out those tasks.
All right. Amazing. I'm just wondering if any of the other panelists want to jump in on this question. Say, for example, give concrete examples of how Mercy or Women AIDS organization is doing to recognize its volunteers. But if not, we can just move on to the next question. Anyone?
Sure. If I can add a bit on that, Arman. So I think definitely I don't think volunteers they put in effort for that time just to get a few free t-shirts or button badges. I think there has to be something bigger or stronger than that. Something it's their passion, so that they are passionate to volunteer. So I think another some sort of a recognition that could be given to the volunteers is also maybe opportunity for to take on bigger role in volunteering, not just doing the field work, but also in terms of ideas or taking on a lead on a mission, and also like Miss Nisha mentioned, I think the trainings and can be in other than the courses. Definitely they should not be burdened by the courses, but I think other than that, we could also provide them with trainings and courses for their personal and professional development as well.
Great. Thank you for your responses, everyone. I think we can just move on to the third question that we have here. So are there any particular changes in the future of volunteerism in Malaysia that you are excited to see? And the first person that comes to mind is Ms. Alia, because you were saying about how you're also learning. So it is an exciting space to be in. And I think this is what we all share in common, everyone on this call. So do you think maybe there's something to look forward to in the third sector in the next, 10 to 20 years?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to look forward to in terms of a lot of the issues that maybe in the past been put in the back burner are becoming more pressing. As you mentioned earlier in our session, I think COVID created a sense of urgency, and I think a post-COVID world now, maybe in a very selfish way, climate change is the most pressing issue moving forward, right? And seeing how it is a very much multifaceted issue, and there's multitudes of different ways to volunteer towards such a major cause. I think being able to see how people innovate, how people kind of change the way we volunteer moving forward will be quite exciting. But ultimately, I think this is more of a word of caution for everyone as well. Try to always remember that fine line between volunteering and unpaid labor, right? Because you need to value the skills and what you offer when you volunteer, and especially as young people, sometimes we may discount what sort of skills moving forward we can actually then sustain ourselves. Like, don't overstretch yourself just for your causes and for your passions, but also remember to go back to your center. So I kind of added on to that question, but I think it's a really important message I want to send to young people, especially that it's not selfish to put yourself forward sometimes, but whenever you have the opportunity and the time to do for others, definitely I recommend it, because it's not just for other people, it's actually for yourself. This is what makes our life rich. And sincere apologies if I sound weird. I just recovered from COVID, so that explains a bit of my sengauness lah. So thank you so much for having me this morning. So I really appreciate the opportunity.
You're doing great, Ms. Alia. Thank you so much for pulling through. Okay, panelists, we don't have a lot of time, but I really want to take as many questions as possible. So I'm just going to open it to the floor. If anyone wants to take the question at the top, if there is, what has been your biggest defeat in your volunteerism path? Or alternatively, if you want to talk about what inspired you to pursue a career in the third sector. If we maybe can hear from Dr. Vela first.
Yeah, I go with what inspired you to pursue a career in the third sector. I think, based on our discussion the whole day today, the whole few hours today, I think it's all come back again to what you wanted to achieve in your life. You can use this volunteerism, the experiences in volunteerism as part of your skills that you won't be getting in the universities or any official platform or educational platform, but you can use your experiences in getting involved in volunteerism as part of experiences as a life skill for you to become better in the future. So I think volunteerism is always can be inspired in any aspects of your career, and it could be one sector that need to be emphasized on. It cannot be just overlooked. It should be something emphasized on by the government and also by the private sectors. I think looking into the ratio between the government and also non-government organization getting involved in this volunteerism, I think they need some connection, which is a more formal platform for both parties to get involved in terms of a recognition for each of the sector to be developed in the future.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Vela. And in the interest of time, I'll just open the floor to any of the panelists if anyone wants to answer the last question for the day. If there is, what has been your biggest defeat in your volunteerism path?
I think I'll take this, Arman.
Yeah.
So my biggest defeat in my volunteerism path is it's actually the defeat of my ego. As a young person, when I first started working in the humanitarian field, I had this vision of how I was going to do my volunteer work. I watched TVs and I've seen like videos of people in all these people helping starving kids in Africa and things like that. I thought that's what I was going to do. I was going to go out there and feed some hungry kids, and that's what I was going to do. But it was such a reality check for me, and it was such a humbling experience for me. Because when I first started working with marginalized community, it's not a walk in the park. It's very different from what I had imagined. When you're working with marginalized communities and vulnerable people, they're not always in their best moments. Sometimes they're angry because when people are desperate, they're mad at not receiving help in time, with the limited resources and all that. They may throw their frustrations at you as a volunteer. So it's so important for you to take that with a pinch of salt and not be disheartened and stop volunteering altogether. It's just a part of the journey. And over time, you learn how to deal with it better. When I was younger, I used to take it very personal. And then as you, grow, you learn that, they don't mean it like it doesn't come from a bad place. It's just that because, they've been through a lot, they've faced a lot of difficult situations and struggles. So you're just a person in front of them that they can rant to and vent their angers and frustration to. So, that I would say that my biggest defeat was my ego at that time. And that is also a learning experience.
I think that's an origin story that all of us can relate to, right? Because we remember the reasons why we get into this line of work in the first place. And over time, we do grow a bit skeptical, self-critical, and I guess we doubt the decisions that we made in the past. But that is a part of the learning process. So I guess the takeaway from that would be to always go back to the first principles, remind yourselves why you're in the field in the first place, while at the same time, entering it with a beginner's mind that allows for personal development and growth. Yeah, and that words of advice and wisdom bring us to the end of this panel session. Panelists, thank you so much for your time today. I'm really glad we had this opportunity to discuss this at length, but time is not on our side. I'm sure our audience have enjoyed and benefited from this discussion as much as I had. If the four of you could just indulge me one last time for a photo taking session, can I have Adriel to take our pictures, please?
All right, I'll count to 3. If you're ready, 1, 2, 3. Okay, one more. Sorry. 1, 2, 3. Okay.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Adriel. And thank you, panelists, for joining us this morning. Now we're going to go on a 15 minutes break, followed by workshops 1, 2, 3 at 11:30 a.m. Please check your Google Calendar invites for your workshop assignment. If you're in workshop 1 on project management, please stay on this call. For workshop 2, sponsorship and fundraising, and workshop 3 on marketing and digital presence, please hop onto your respective Zoom meetings. The links for which are sent in the chat box below. Stay tuned, everyone. There's more empowerment ahead. And with that, thank you for bearing with me. Assalamualaikum, and enjoy the rest of the summit, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.